Under the fading light of evening, the dry wind carried dust across the open fields. The old cottage leaned slightly to one side, its porch creaking with every gust. Inside, Clara stood by the window, her fingers pressed to the cracked glass, watching the long road that led to her home. She had known this day would come, but knowing did nothing to steady her trembling hands. The faint hum of an approaching engine made her heart sink lower. The black pickup stopped before the gate. From it stepped James Hartley, a man whose boots and name carried weight across the valley. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself like someone who never begged, never lost. Two men followed him, both holding papers that fluttered in the dry air. Clara wiped her palms on her apron and stepped outside. The ground beneath her bare feet was warm from the sun, but she felt cold all over. James looked at her, his shadow long across the dirt. He had seen her before at town meetings, at the feed store, always quiet, always alone. He had thought her stubborn once, foolishly trying to keep this patch of land her father left her. But now there was only weariness in her eyes. Clara's voice was small, yet it carried in the stillness. She told him she could not leave. This cottage was all she had, her father's sweat buried in its wood, her mother's laughter lingering like a ghost in its corners. James listened but did not answer at first. He unfolded the paper, showing her the signatures, the bank's seal. The land was his now, fair and legal, but fairness meant nothing to her as she looked past him toward the horizon, where the fields stretched like a memory she could not touch. Her voice broke as she begged him not to take her home. She said she would work to pay the debt, take any job he offered. Her hands, rough from years of labor, shook as she reached for the papers. He didn't move them away, only watched her, and for the first time that day, something uncertain flickered behind his calm eyes. He asked what she could possibly give him that he didn't already have. She said she could give him loyalty, hard work, and a promise never to give up. It sounded desperate, maybe even foolish, but it was all she had left to offer. He took a slow step closer, and the world seemed to shrink to the space between them. He told her there was one way she could stay, one way to keep her father's land. She lifted her head, and for the briefest second, hope crossed her face. Then he said she would have to become his wife. The words fell between them like stones. The ranch hands looked away, pretending not to hear. Clara's breath caught, and for a long moment she didn't move. Then she laughed, quiet and bitter, thinking it was some cruel joke. But James's expression didn't change. He meant it. She asked why. He told her he needed someone who understood the land, someone who cared about it as much as he did. He said he was tired of women from town who looked at him and saw only money. Clara saw through the words. This was not a proposal of love, but of convenience, a bargain disguised as mercy. Yet behind his voice there was something else, something that sounded like loneliness. That night, Clara sat by the windmill behind the cottage, the same one her father built years ago. The metal blades creaked against the wind, crying out like a weary soul. She thought about what she would lose if she left, the graves of her parents, the wildflowers by the fence, the stars she had named as a child. She thought about what she would give up if she stayed, her freedom, her pride, her future. She whispered to the dark, asking her father what he would do. Only the wind answered. By dawn, her decision was made. When James opened the door the next morning, Clara stood there. Her hair was tied back, her eyes red from a sleepless night, but clear with resolve. She said she would marry him. There was no ceremony that day, no flowers, no music. The preacher came from town, said the words, and left as quickly as he came. Afterward, she followed James to the ranch house. It was larger than she imagined, clean and cold, full of rooms that smelled of polished wood and silence. She felt small inside it, a ghost wandering through someone else's world. He showed her where she could stay, and told her she could do as she pleased, as long as she helped on the ranch. She nodded, though her throat ached with words she couldn't speak. Days turned into weeks. She rose before dawn, feeding the horses, carrying buckets, mending fences. James watched her from a distance, sometimes offering quiet instructions, but never more. The workers began to respect her. She was not like the women who had come before. She worked harder than most men. Never complained, never asked for pity, At night, she sat on the porch, the same stars above her, though the world felt entirely different now. Sometimes James joined her, saying little. The silence between them slowly changed from discomfort to something almost peaceful. One evening, she found a horse tangled in wire near the north field. Without waiting for help, she cut the wire herself, her hands bleeding as she freed the animal. When James arrived, breathless, he saw her kneeling beside the frightened horse, whispering to calm it. Something inside him shifted then. For the first time, he saw her not as the poor girl who begged him for mercy, but as the woman who loved the land as fiercely as he did. He helped her to her feet, his hand lingering for a moment longer than it needed to. She thanked him and turned away quickly, unsure what to do with the warmth that rose to her cheeks. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept hearing her voice, soft and steady, speaking to the horse. He realized how her presence had changed the house. There was laughter now, quiet, fleeting moments of it, and the kitchen smelled of bread again. She had planted flowers by the porch, wild and uneven, yet beautiful. The next morning, he left a small, carved wooden horse on her windowsill. He didn't tell her he made it, but she knew. She kept it by her bed, touching it sometimes when she thought no one saw. Months passed, and the ranch began to thrive. The fields were green again, the fences mended, the horses healthy. Together they worked side by side, their words fewer but their glances longer. Something unspoken grew between them, as steady and stubborn as the land itself. One stormy night, lightning struck the barn. Flames shot high into the rain-dark sky. Clara ran out barefoot, shouting for help, dragging buckets of water before anyone else arrived. James caught her arm, shouting that it was too dangerous, but she broke free and kept going. Together they fought the fire until the rain finally smothered it. When it was over, they stood drenched, breathing hard, the barn saved but scarred. James looked at her through the rain. She was shaking, not from fear but from exhaustion. He reached out, brushed the soot from her cheek, and said softly that she had more courage than any man he'd ever known. For the first time, she didn't look away. Something passed between them, something deep and wordless. The next day, he rode into town for supplies. When he returned, he brought her a new dress, simple but beautiful, the color of wild sage. She refused it at first, saying she didn't need gifts. He told her it wasn't a gift, it was gratitude. She took it quietly, her eyes shining, though she said nothing. That evening, she wore the dress to supper. James said nothing when he saw her, but his hands trembled slightly when he poured her tea.
They ate in silence, yet the air was full of meaning. Seasons turned.
The townspeople whispered that their marriage had changed. The poor girl and the rich rancher no longer looked like strangers bound by circumstance, but like two people who had found something real in the ashes of necessity. One summer afternoon, they rode together to the far hill where her cottage once stood. The ruins were covered in grass, the windmill long still. Clara walked through the remains, her fingers brushing the stones. James watched her quietly. She turned to him and said she used to think he had taken everything from her. But now she realized that what she lost had made space for something new. He asked what that was. She said it was belonging, not to the land or the house, but to someone who finally understood her silence. He smiled faintly, his voice low as he told her she had once begged him not to take her home. Now, he said, it felt like she had given him one instead. The sun sank behind them, painting the sky in gold and fire. She reached for his hand, rough and familiar, and he held it gently as if it were the most precious thing he owned. The wind carried the smell of earth and grass and the distant hum of the ranch below. For the first time in years, Clara felt at peace. She realized the home she fought so hard to keep was never just wood and stone. It was the courage to love again, the strength to stay when everything told her to run. And as the evening light wrapped around them, the poor girl and the rich rancher stood side by side, bound not by debt or mercy but by the quiet, steady truth that had grown between them. The land that once divided them now united them. The house they built together would stand where her old cottage once had, not as a symbol of loss, but of beginning. And somewhere deep in the fields, her father's windmill turned once more, slow and sure, singing its old, faithful song to the wind.